Holy cow, the interstate's loud this morning. Those of you that are a lot smarter than I am, comment down below, let me know what you think. I'm sure it has something to do with weather, temperature, humidity, dew point, whatever, but some mornings it sounds like the interstate traffic's going right down our gravel road. Most mornings you can't even hear it. Crazy. Here we go, chicks. Hey, chicks. Yeah. Man, it's the problem with animals being on a routine. Even if you're off by 5 minutes, they start screaming at you. Come on, girls. My third cup of coffee. All right, good morning everyone. Before I begin, sorry if this video isn't very creative. I was up all night. It was a hell of a night at work last night. The weather finally broke. You know, we were dealing with over 100 degrees for like a week, and last night, Saturday night, it got down to like 75. The whole city decided to party. We were up all night. I'm running on like 4 hours of sleep here, so sorry if I sound kind of boring this morning. I wanted to do that part 2 of that water video, and kind of as I thought about it over the week or so after I did part 1, I realized there really isn't a whole lot to show you guys. I probably could have wrapped it all up in that first video. This stuff really isn't that hard. It's just, it can be tough trying to decide what's going to work best for you. And like I said in part 1 of that video, I've had to evolve my system, not only as I've grown in animal numbers, but just as I've realized what is not efficient. So there's obviously a really hard way of doing things and a really cheap way of doing things. And one of my mottos in life is work harder, not smarter, because there's plenty of smart people in this world. But when it comes to trying to get daily chores done, especially if you have a job in town and you're on a time crunch before you got to go to work, or when you come home from work, or even just if you want to do other things with your daily life, there becomes a point where it becomes more efficient to maybe spend some money or change up your tactics to get things done quicker. This is just a little Polaris Ranger 500 that I bought earlier this year. It helps us feed hay during the winter, and I say us because when I'm on my 24-hour shifts during the middle of winter, if we have a pop-up storm or it gets really cold, whatever, I might have my fiance or even my dad throw another bale of hay when I'm on shift. And we used to, I'll show you it in a minute, but I used to just take one of those carts, those little 4-sided like flatbed carts you can buy at the hardware store, put a bale of hay in that, walk it down from the barn to wherever the cows are at. And efficiency, no, not at all. Hard work, yeah, definitely, which I didn't mind it, but those days when I had to have my fiance feed hay or my dad feed hay, it's 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 5 degrees, maybe like, 6, 8, 12 inches of snow on the ground, and I'm asking them to throw a 50-pound bale in a cart, lug it downhill through the snow, and then back uphill back to the barn to feed the cows. It just wasn't working. So that was a big driver on buying this Ranger, was obviously having chores, making chores easier, feeding hay, delivering water, stuff like that. I'll also try and insert a picture. We were running an older 0-turn Toro lawnmower, and I had a cart hooked up to that thing, and I was using that thing like a dang utility vehicle. And it was actually our 3rd mower. We were on our 3rd mower because for the longest time, even before we built our house out here, my dad was using mowers like utility vehicles. And we even ended up splitting the frame. We cracked the frame on one of these John Deere riding mowers before. So I knew it was only a matter of time before we'd be spending another couple $1,000s getting a new mower because we just beat the hell out of the one. I've got a great picture, like I said, hopefully I'll get it in here, but it shows the mower loaded down with all sorts of fencing supplies and stuff like that, and I'm trying to go through pasture that's super tall like this, and it just wasn't working. So that was a long way of saying, case in point, where the water trough is right now is fairly far away from the well pit. So if you can see the animal shelter behind me, even beyond that is the well pit that I was talking about. I would drop garden hose down into and use that Milwaukee transfer pump to draw out of. This is 10 times easier to fill it off of the hydrant, the well hydrant up at the barn, or even off of the house. Fill this 45-gallon tank, zip down here, dump it just like you saw, and then move on with my day, right? As opposed to opening that well pit, dropping hose down in there, starting the primer, moving hose all the way over to where the tank was at, and constantly marching hose through that pasture. Not to mention, once I got the hose to the tank, like I said, I think it was, I can't remember what the figures were on that, 8 gallons a minute maybe. So just sitting there waiting for the tank to fill off of that. It just got to a point where it wasn't efficient, and I was running around trying to get all that stuff done in the morning before I had to go to work, and it was a huge waste of time. So having your system evolve when you start to, I didn't go out and buy this thing right away, right? When we moved out here, I still was telling myself, you don't need it, just work a little bit harder, spend a little bit more time, and spend a little less money to get stuff done. That system has evolved. I've realized that, I do need it, and we're slowly starting to grow in animal numbers, and that's another big driver for doing this. When I first started with the three animals, it was really easy to fill the trough once a day because those three animals weren't going through it. And I'll show you how I moved the trough even to keep water in it, so I didn't have to refill it. But as our animal numbers have grown, I just found myself having to fill this tank multiple times a day, especially in the middle of summer when it's super hot. So right now this system works for me. It works great. 50-gallon trough. The animals aren't going through it super quick. It's easy to move around from grazing strip to grazing strip. Hopefully I'm going to reach a point where 50 gallons is not enough, right? And I say hopefully because that just means that our animal numbers have gone up to the point that I need something more. So the option there becomes, I actually have another 50-gallon trough up in the barn. One of the options there becomes use two 50-gallon troughs. I still keep those troughs manageable enough that I can move them from grazing strip to grazing strip. The other thing, and this is what I was getting at in that first video when I was talking about using like an IBC tote that you pallet fork and take somewhere, using that as basically a in-between water source is, I can buy one of those 365-gallon IBC totes. I can plant it halfway in this back pasture or in some designated central location in the back pasture. That tote can now become basically another quick water source. I'm thinking particularly like when I get next door on that 4 acres over there, that 4-acre lease, that's going to be far enough away from the well pit that I'm not really going to want to drive over, fill up, go back, fill up one 50-gallon trough. Drive back over, fill up, go back, fill up the other 50-gallon trough. So that's where I might invest in one of those IBC totes in the future. So my thought on that is fork it with the tractor, take it down, whatever, plant it next door, like I said, somewhere in a good central location. For a week, I can just take the Ranger right up to that IBC tote, short section of hose, Milwaukee transfer pump, draw out of the IBC tote, fill this tank, and then take it to my various spots in the pasture. Obviously, I can also just use the garden hose idea, draw directly out of that IBC tote and stretch garden hose to wherever the trough is at. One of the things I have to think about is, and this was actually one of the holdups I had with getting that IBC tote in the very beginning, is shade. Obviously, if you plant 375 gallons or 250 gallons of water somewhere, it's not moving again unless you bring the tractor down or until that thing gets empty. So if you put it in an area that is just getting baked with sunshine, that's going to end up being hot water that you're filling your troughs with. And that makes a big difference on the consumption that your animals have. And it makes a big difference on how much they're going to eat throughout the day. So that's another reason why I like these 50-gallon troughs. While they're limited in the number of animals that they can water, it's really easy for them to drink that down, and then it just makes more sense to dump it out and refill it with nice, cool, clean water, maybe during that second move of the day, so they always have that cool water that's going to help with digestion. They're going to drink more of it, and in turn, that's going to make them eat more. So one of the issues obviously becomes on my 24-hour shifts, I'm going to have to give them enough water at 5:30 in the morning to last until 7:30 the next morning. So that's where I think 2 troughs are going to come in. Again, something I'm still working on. This is what I'm saying. Like, when I first, the ideas that I had before I got the cows on how I was going to do water, to when I got the first 3 animals, to when I started having calves, to when they started lactating, to when we had that drought. It's an ever evolving process on how you're going to effectively water your animals, and that's just something that you're going to have to figure out. Another option that I had, and I actually had a few of you comment on my last video when I mentioned the way our property was laid out. Some of you caught that I said that there's a creek behind me that runs through. It runs through our property, and a little bit of it runs through the neighbor's property. Some people have mentioned, can you draw out of the creek? That was actually something that I considered too, and it's still on the table. I haven't totally scratched that idea. I would have to invest in a trash pump, which honestly, on a farm, on a ranch, having a gasoline powered trash pump that can transfer a lot of water is probably a good thing to have anyway. So it's probably a purchase that I should plan on making. And so that's one of the thoughts too, right? 2.5-inch diameter hose drawing out of the creek will provide a lot of good water flow that I can move throughout, again, not only our pasture here, but the neighbor's 4-acre lease. So one of the strategies that I used when I first started, and it's great if you have just a small number of animals, is I'll split my paddocks with the water trough. Like I said, when I first started with those 3 girls, they weren't hardly drinking any water, during the day. There wasn't enough of them. So I found myself, in order to slide this trough over to the next grazing strip, I'd have to dump the thing out. And again, when I was running that Milwaukee transfer pump with garden hose, it just took forever to refill the trough all the way. So what I started doing is I would split the water tank with their paddock shift. So this is kind of a different example right now. They're at the end of this strip, so that permanent fence is up there. This afternoon when I come back to move them, I'm actually going to be bringing them back down, and I'm going to set up a new strip starting here, and then we're going to just march our way down. So this works whether it's a split for your 2-day moves, basically going north to south, or if it's east to west. So you can picture this just like a cross fence. So now let's say my strips are running this way, and I've got another, cross fence up here for the PM move. The same thing applies. So they would be in this area for the morning. They can access the water trough. I take this fence down, move them into the next chunk, put the back fence back up, and now they can access the water, and I don't have to dump the tank to drag it. So if you have a small number of animals, that's just a strategy I started doing. Again, it's not rocket science. It just, for some reason, it took me like 6 months to figure out, hey, why don't I just do this instead of dumping the water tank to move it just to fill it up again, especially because it was usually half full just with those 3 animals when I came down to move them. But now that I have 5 animals, and especially this time of year, during the middle of summer, I'll fill it up in the morning, and by the time I come back down about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's damn near empty. So at that point, it's just easier to dump the rest of it out and then carry the trough to where it has to go next, and then refill it then. And like I said, this gives me a chance then to fill it up with cool, clean water when I come down in the afternoon. So this was that cart I was talking about feeding hay with, but I just got it at the local hardware store. When I was still moving the trough multiple times a day from grazing cell to grazing cell, there was a period of time that I was using this to move the water. So I would set the water trough right on top of here, and I would just take one ratchet strap down the middle, strap the tank onto this, and then that way I could essentially wheel the trough to the next grazing cell without having to dump it. So when there was only 3 animals, like I said, I'd come down for the afternoon move. There'd still be half a tank. I didn't feel like I needed to dump out that water. So this allowed me just to take that half full or even 3/4 full tank and wheel it over to the next grazing cell, and it saved a bunch of time. Now, where I ran into issues was with calves. Calves really need to have access to water within their first week of life. So even with a small, 50-gallon trough like I have there, very low to the ground, low profile, it still was too tall sitting on this cart for that calf to get a Dexter calf, that is, to get his head over it and take a drink, especially as the water level dropped to about half. Now, if you're running full-size cows, this probably isn't going to be an issue for you, but running Dexters, it was something that I ran into, because even now with that calf that we have, she was born in May. She was born in May. April? She was born at the end of April. she's still, I tried it the other day. I put that cart up, or that trough up on this cart. She still isn't tall enough to get her head down in there and get a good drink when that water level drops to about half. So it really doesn't work unless you have full-size animals or mature Dexters. I will mention though that originally I bought this cart with the largest wheels that they made because it's easier to roll over obstacles, right? So it's a lot easier, especially when it's loaded, to get over bumpy pasture or gravel or whatever. You can get these carts in, I don't know what size wheels these are, maybe like 10 inches. I know you can get them in even 6-inch wheels. So that would move that cart a lot lower to the ground. So if this is something you think might work for your operation, I would definitely consider buying the smallest wheeled cart you can to keep that trough as low to the ground as you can. So that's pretty much it. I know this stuff is not groundbreaking. I hope that it offered some insight into what I do, maybe gave some of you guys some ideas, or at least kind of started getting the wheels spinning on how you can take some of the things that I do and apply it to your operation. This is where I think having a micro ranch, having a small scale farmer ranch is both a blessing and a curse. We don't have enough land or enough animal numbers to need a giant water tank in the bed of a pickup, or a water trailer that has to be pulled with a tractor. You know, I'm not having to dole out 200, 300 gallons at a time for a giant herd of animals. So I can get away with very bare bones and cheap ways to deliver water to a small number of animals. That's a plus. But then on the downside is that there can be a tipping point to where maybe your animal numbers start to increase, or your land base starts to increase slowly, and you realize that your archaic bare bones way of delivering water is no longer going to work anymore, or it doesn't work efficiently. Cows are coming up behind me. And then that's where it doesn't justify the cost of piped water and hydrants all throughout your property, or a dedicated water truck, or a trailer that you pull with your small tractor, or maybe even the purchase of, like what I got here, a Ranger to deliver water, but you could really use it. So it's kind of that balance of what do you spend your money on when you don't truly need it, but it would really help. So maybe you just can't justify spending the money on a very efficient, easy way to deliver water because your land base or your animal numbers aren't there. So it's a balancing act. You're just gonna have to kind of figure out what works for you and start slow. That's one of the things that I hope to do in these videos that I am putting out there, is that there is no harm in starting slow. When I first decided to get into the animals, hey buddy, when I first decided to get into the animals, obviously I wanted a ton of cows right away. I wanted a ton of land, but I decided to start small, and it seems like every day I'm glad that I don't have a ton of animals, because I'm still making mistakes. I am learning the hard way, and it's a lot easier to learn with just a couple of animals. It's a lot easier to learn with just a couple of animals than it is if I had a ton of animals. So not spending a bunch of money, not going crazy big right out of the gate, slowly building up your system, is just something that I feel is important, and hopefully I'm getting that message across. All right, I better sign off. Girls are going crazy. Thanks for watching, guys.